Thanks for being with me today, buddy. How are you?
Sam, I am fabulous. Wonderful.
Well,
Happy to be here and thank you. I'm grateful.
well, I'm glad that you're here. For those of you who are new to the podcast, my name is Sam. This is Sam's Healing Podcast. And today I'm joined by someone who we haven't had the pleasure of interviewing. We've tried, James, you and I have tried a time or two, but your wife, Sharon Renierson, has been a guest a couple of times, and she's brilliant. She's one of the most lovable guests we've ever had in. Every time she comes in, people love her heart, her kindness. You, brilliant in your own right, have so much to give, and I thought it was time to have you come in. So, as maybe an introduction for those that haven't they don't know who Sharon is or know what you do, or just a refresher, tell everybody a little bit about the intensives that you do, who you are, and your guys' specialty.
Okay. So Sharon and I are primarily, I guess I'll say, a couple in recovery from sex addiction. I actually do pass the test with flying colors at the level of sex addiction. So I do believe that everything is a differential diagnosis, and sex addiction's at the very top. So I'm an A student. I like to succeed. What can I say? Okay, so unfortunately, that is the case. So we have really been through the grinder, and so Sharon has. When we got into this, now it's our 13th year, and Sharon had to figure out betrayed partner work on her own. Basically, there really wasn't a lot of help then, and I went through SLAA, so 12-step based. That does not mean that the people that we help meet the criteria for sex addiction. We help people from who have gone through infidelity, through compulsive sexual behavior, through addiction. So we're very clear. We don't like labels. So we're very clear about, well, let's see, overall, it's problematic sexual behavior. So we own Core Relationship Recovery, which you can reach at corerelationship.recovery.com, but what we're known by our .com anyway is hopeforus.com with FOR, not the number 4. That'll take you somewhere completely different. So so we work with individuals and couples, typically individuals of couples and couples. So not that many single people come through, although we definitely work with them. And our emphasis is from early discovery all the way through what we could call couples post-traumatic growth.
Yeah, that's fantastic.
Brand new, which you can't really. Recovery is almost a misnomer, right? It's because it's really not trying to recover something, not trying to salvage what was. You're trying to grow something brand new. So that's our emphasis. We do it through intensives. So the intensives are typically 5 days. They can be longer. Rarely do we do shorter, because you just can't get the work. And what we're going to be talking about a bit today is one of the reasons why, because we're not looking at just changing behaviors, right? That's actually the sort of the 1%. Right, so then you get 19% of it is sort of what's immediately underneath the behaviors, so the emotions, the feelings, and then the rest is what we call the junkyard. That's 80% of it, and that's really why do we behave this way, right? What starts it off? What gets us there? And so that's kind of what takes a bit longer, because you've really got to delve into it. And a lot of people, we do 5 timelines of people's history, so negative, positive, sexual and intimacy history, substance, and medical. And the reason that we split them out is because it's really interesting to see where they all overlap and where the difficulties have come, right? And so tracing all of those.
No, so that's fantastic.
Really.
I think when for someone who has, for the listener or the viewing audience, trying to navigate this, and they've maybe done a timeline here and done a timeline there, to hear like 5 timelines probably makes them go, what? And so I love the thoroughness of it, because as you said, it's not about just changing behavior. It's about transformation, changing hearts. It's not about necessarily reclaiming the old, but it is about building the new, but not necessarily just throwing out your history, but being able to say, we are swimming in an ocean of chaos and hurt and pain. And so I'm thrilled today, because I think Sharon is such a beautiful navigator of understanding the betrayed, and also how to help the betrayed, and how to create a sense of safety. When I hear her talk, it's like, this woman just freaking gets it, because she's so kind and she's so empathetic, as are you, but you bring a different side of the coin, because you, being on the other side, being the unfaithful. And for those of us that are trying to help people, for those of us that have tried to help ourselves in this, as I want to get into the meat of it, as we kind of talk about today's topic, and that's intimacy avoidance. And in my own practice of caring for people, I come in contact with so many men, but also women, who are just intimacy avoidant, like the thought of not sexual intimacy, but just vulnerability, authenticity, sharing who they are, letting their guard down, just opening up the seam of their heart, from childhood trauma to rape to molestation to awful instances, or even just being betrayed. And so, but before we can talk about intimacy avoidance, I mean, we kind of have to talk about what unfortunately has become a bit of a buzzword, and everybody kind of throws it out, but you guys are masters at dealing with this. And you have been experts that are not caring about, oh, we're trying to put our names everywhere. We're trying to get into the trenches and the foxholes with people. So maybe talk just a little teaser on intimacy avoidance, but then talk about how this childhood trauma can oftentimes set us up for disaster as we get older, right?
Right. So I'd love to start by just saying, there's this, we often have clients, and typically we're dealing with husband and wife, and the husband is typically the one who has acted out, and we call the people who have acted out actors. You say unfaithful, which I love. And it's hard to find, you don't want to label, okay, addicts or compulsives, or because so by saying actors or unfaithful, that really covers it, right? And actors is about acting out, but it's also about acting, right? So it's hopefully a fairly neutral term that people can attach to. We have found that it is. We haven't had very many people object to that. So one of the things that I want to just touch on really quickly is that often the actor will come in and say, well, yes, I've betrayed my wife, and there is the betrayal trauma, and I understand that. And she has a lot of family of origin trauma.
Oh, Lord. Yes.
Okay, so everybody has family of origin stuff. I mean, we all come from a family, and nobody escapes childhood without issues. And
Right.
and I'll get into where that really occurs, because a lot of people will say, well, I wasn't traumatized, I wasn't abused, right? So I'll get into that in a second, but I do want to make sure that that people understand that betrayal trauma can stand on its own. And it's the most significant thing, and it has happened. It's just happened, or it's the most recent big thing that has happened.
Absolutely.
So childhood stuff, family of origin stuff, can exacerbate betrayal trauma symptoms, but they are not causative, right? And it's really, really important. And sometimes it takes us a bit to get that sort of into the actor's mindset, into their understanding.
When you say it's not causative, for people like me that we need a little bit more extra explanation, map that out. What does that mean?
what that means is that somebody could have a childhood that was pretty reasonable, no big T traumas, right? No abuse or neglect. And so for the most part, they're pretty healthy. They're dealing with normal things that people deal with from childhood. And then along comes betrayal. Well, this is then the biggest piece of their biggest trauma ever, perhaps. And so then what happens is that the things that happened in childhood that you couldn't necessarily label a trauma or a PTSD symptomology coming from it, for instance, then those become areas that grow, sort of they're seeds, if you will, that begin to grow, not good seeds, right? And so those then become bigger because of the betrayal trauma. So let's say that somebody, a partner's dad wasn't around a whole lot, had to work and traveled for work and just, normal human thing, wasn't necessarily unfaithful or any of those things, was loving when he was home, but wasn't home very much. And absence is a problem, right? Because the person who's absent can't fulfill all of those childhood needs that a child deserves, right? And so now that absence the negative part of that absence become enhanced in the betrayal trauma when that comes, because then there's this total absence. This partner's just lost the love of her life, her husband.
Yeah.
And so that then pulls on some of those negative things from childhood that probably weren't really noticed until then. Does
Okay. That makes sense.
Okay.
That makes sense. So keep going, because everything, I take notes while you come in, while Sharon comes in. I take notes because I learned so much from y'all. So keep going on the thoughts of, childhood trauma and intimacy avoidance.
Let's look at childhood trauma. So most people are going to think that when they think trauma, they think big T trauma. They think abuse, they think neglect, maybe, right? They're two sides of the same coin. Let's just call it a really fat coin, because everything in between is what we term, and I don't know that it's our term, but we term it unmet childhood needs.
Right.
So we've detailed, I believe it's 22 different needs that children deserve. And if we can think of it in terms of deserving, right, it makes it a lot more palatable and we can understand it better. So they deserve these 22 things, and every one of us deserves it at 100%, right? Growing up. And this is going to be an important piece a bit later, but what we as children, we get it externally, right? Our parents fulfill it. As we grow, our teachers fulfill it. In teenage years, our friends and groups and such help fulfill that. Other significant caregivers like grandparents from day one can help fulfill that. Siblings, depending on their age. So, for instance, my sister was 4 years older than me. She passed away when she was 24. Which still gets me.
Yeah.
35 years later.
It absolutely does. It absolutely does. There's an old motto that says, you scratch an adult, you find a child, right? And I live by that. When I work with people and trying to help heal childhood wounds, like, dude, I get it. I was talking to a client this morning during a session, and I started to relive my own moment. And I was like, hey, just so you know, this is authentic work. This is us being in a foxhole in the trenches, right? I love it.
So yeah, Alex, my sister, my mom and dad, even though they were separated when I was 1, got back together, and divorced when I was 3, they still ran a restaurant together for many years. And so my sister, who was 4 years older than me, which if you think about it, isn't very much older, was really sort of a substitute mother, because my mom they were working 16 to 18 hours a day. I'm not saying that there weren't other issues with my mom and dad. There absolutely were. My dad was what they call and they're both British, right? So I'm going to use their accents, but what would have been called a philanderer in the day.
Yeah.
I am not a sex addict. I'm not compulsive. I'm a philanderer.
Right.
And my mother had 5 different boyfriends, and they were all British military. My father was British military. They were Navy captains, Navy lieutenants, who visited the Bermuda, is where I was born and grew up, and they visited the island once a year for a couple of weeks. So, you could say that she had some romantic and love, compulsive, addictive end of things. So there were absolutely all those things, and they simply worked a lot, right? So and they argued a lot, and they didn't like each other very much. So we all get this type of stuff. This is not absolutely abnormal.
No,
I wasn't abused. I wasn't, well, not there.
right.
British boarding school, absolutely. So when we look at, okay, abuse or neglect, okay, but those unmet childhood needs are really what affect everybody. Because to the extent that we don't get what we deserve, so we don't get the 100%. So let's say we get it 60, 70%, which is pretty darn good. I mean, you think baseball, that's incredible, right? So, I mean, if you're batting 500 in baseball, you're
Right.
doing, I mean, that's unbelievable. That's superstar.
Right.
So, so we're doing really well, but there's still that 30 to 40% missing. And here's the external piece that's so important to remember. The extent to which we didn't get these needs met, we end up looking for them externally as we leave childhood and move into adulthood. The problem with that is that during childhood, that is just how it is. Things are fulfilled externally and should be fulfilled externally. When we're adults, then it starts to be drawing other people's energy. So it can get to a point. I like to say that I was a psychic vampire, right? So an emotional vampire. I drained Sharon dry.
Right.
She was this bubbly, wonderful, happy person. I took all of that away from her. Thank goodness it's been restored to a great extent, in a different way, mind you, not as innocent, right? Not as much beautiful child energy in there, but she's just a remarkable person, period. And so
And
great.
so, no, you see that on her. You would meet her, and if you've been through trauma, you would say, yeah, Sharon's been through it, because look how kind, look how gracious, look how loving she is. If you aren't familiar with this world, you'd meet Sharon and be like, are you kidding me? She's actually been through hellacious, life-changing trauma. There's just something about her. And so, I think you just said something really obviously on point of, we look for them externally when we become adults. So does that translate into becoming an adult where we start looking for it externally when we should be looking for it internally? And as someone would say, reparenting ourselves?
Exactly. I love that word. So reparenting, internal resourcing, right? As a child, we resource externally. Nobody really teaches us, or most people aren't taught to resource externally, right? They don't learn that. And so what ends up happening is that you keep seeking those unmet needs externally. And if there are particular ones that are not met to a much greater extent, you really seek those. Now, I'm also in adult children of alcoholics and dysfunctional families. They added that because not everybody had alcoholic parents. And so now with dysfunctional families, you could probably include, most of the world.
Yep, absolutely.
So I was in my third meeting, and there was this lady's voice, right? I couldn't see her because for some reason they had engineered this building with a column almost in the middle of the room. And she was behind the column. So it was sort of like, okay, this disembodied voice, right? And she said this most profound thing that just has stuck with me. She said, it's like I'm walking around with my umbilical cord still attached, trying to plug it into everybody I see.
Wow.
And it still sends chills up my spine because that just is so profoundly said. I mentioned it to her a couple of years later when I saw her in another meeting, and she said, I said that? That's really good.
Yeah, absolutely.
Can I
So we're
use that? Because she was a therapist apparently, and I said, well, it's yours. So I'm asking if I can use it.
and that's where affair partners come in. That's where addictions come in, right? That's where high risk behavior comes in because we're trying to, one therapist I talk to all the time, she says, we're trying to self-soothe. We are masters at trying to self-soothe. And in our primitive understanding, we think another partner, another bender with, multiple partners or multiple affair partners, man or woman, is going to be the answer, right?
So we seek that attention, whatever it is outside, right? And it is never fulfilling. It cannot fulfill. It's then we get into the basic cycle of, okay, act out, right? And then immediately, especially with sex, there's an orgasm in sex is not the height of it. It's really the hyperarousal state. The orgasm actually is almost immediately followed by shame. And
Hmm.
people have, here's where guilt and shame, guilt and then immediately into shame are very close to. And then, discerning those becomes a problem because all guilt feels like shame, and so on. And then that leads to anxiety, depression, etc., and at such an intolerable level that you have to self-soothe and act out.
What I love, this is how smart you are. What I love is that, like, you just throw out these little nuggets, like, oh, and all guilt leads to shame, and hyper arousal. And I'm just sitting here going, gosh, this dude is so brilliant. He's just handing out little Cheerios of breadcrumbs, leading us to go, give us more. But here's the thought. Here's the thought. So, and I'm teeing this up for you. So we're looking around, trying to plug in our umbilical cord. We get older, and then we do this thing where we are intimacy avoidant. You would think we would be like, I'm so happy to be intimate with my partner. I'm so happy to lean in. I'm so happy I don't have to go plug my cord in. I've got it plugged in this one place, and everything should be great. And then our spouse, our partner is like, yeah, I want to be intimate. And we're like, this isn't working. And yeah, no, I don't want to do that. And I'll meet with people and go, hey, here's how we're going to build intimacy. And they're like, man, that's great, Sam. They don't go do it. They don't do their homework. They don't do their assignment. And you sit here and go, bro, or as the young folk now say, bruh, I'm trying to help you be intimate with your partner, and you are massively intimacy avoidant. So help us understand that, oh great purveyor of freedom and liberty.
All right. So intimacy avoidance really, it comes down to that same thing that I was talking about with unmet childhood needs being deserved, right? What we deserve. And so as adults, if we didn't get what we needed, as children, we feel like we didn't deserve them. So there's a reason for that, a really good biological, neurological, so bioneurological reason. And that is that between the ages of 0 and 12, really minus 5 months, and 12, our brain's not fully formed.
Right.
So as we become teenagers, we're able to begin to discern things much better, right? So if our brain isn't fully formed, 0 to 12, what that means is the world is about us, for us, and because of us. And so that means we take on everything, right? We take on all the blame, the credit. Everything that happens is centered around us. This is absolutely normal development, right? 0 to 12, that is exactly not thinking about other people, but being the center of the universe is how we should be. And I'm sure you've met many adults who still believe, who still kind of act from that place where they are the center of the universe. That means
Right.
that they really are sort of stuck, they've gotten stuck somewhere in
Yeah.
that 0 to 12 developmental stage. And so many of us have in many, many ways. And that's part of what this affects. So when I think I'm getting off track here. I'm want to do that. So so you're gonna have to cut this piece. What was the question?
Yeah. So
my
how do we
going.
how do we become so avoidant
Yes.
when you would think that's what we want?
Right. So when we don't feel that we are deserving, which is unconscious, there's not very many people out there who will say to you, well, I don't deserve love. I mean, most people will say they do. And guess what? They do. And so why, when it's there, can't they connect with it, or do they avoid it, or do they kind of hold it at arm's length, right?
Thank you.
And if you think, I know that for me, there were times when I was growing into my intimacy, when I wanted it, and I felt like it was just kind of out of reach, right? I couldn't quite grab it, I couldn't quite connect, and it was so frustrating because I didn't know how. Obviously, learned how. So the intimacy avoidance, I like to call it, we like to call it intimacy adversity. So we put it on a spectrum, which is, you can see it on the website, hopeforus.com, and then you look under, I think it's services, but and it'll, or no, it's under something called you, meaning we do us, you, right? So and it's under intimacy adversity. So, and then people can see the spectrum there, but it basically goes from, hey, here's healthy, what we're all aiming for, right? Connection, collaboration, and then we have a hesitance, resistance, avoidance, aversion, anorexia, and then enmity. So what a lot of people think is, especially the anorexia, that's a big term that people use. I mean, it's sort of been the industry standard for many, many years, right?
Yeah.
The person who came up with that talked about how anorexia has a deliberate piece to it, and it really doesn't. Enmity, which is why I've added that, is really more of sort of holding your partner up as the enemy, right? So that's very much, oh, no, I'm going to punish you, or I'm going to hurt you by not attaching. So that's very conscious. I think that anorexia, there might be 10-20% consciousness, to the extent that you know that you have an issue, but not being deliberate about being cruel. So then,
is it that we just feel like I don't deserve this, so I'm going to push it away because we don't know how to handle it?
so again, not conscious, right? But
Right.
yeah, it is scary. It's scary to have somebody love you to that extent, because largely a lot of people will feel very responsible for that other person's feelings then, and that's too much. So that can come from I don't like the word enmeshment terribly much, but it's what's used. So let's say that dad is away a lot, and then mom's there, but she doesn't really have anybody to talk to, or say what's happening with what she's feeling. And she has a son or a daughter. And I see it in, mother-son relationships, that comes up a lot more. And then so she starts talking about her emotional stuff with her son, whatever age he is too young. Right. So she's essentially making him her partner, not sexually.
Yep.
We're
Sure.
talking emotion, right? So
Many people call that being parentified, right?
absolutely, it's a great word. Sharon uses an interesting idea that, okay, a young boy like that becomes his mother's ego,
Oh,
right? So
wow.
the ego strength, right? It comes from her son. Well, then what happens is that that child is their development is disrupted because they're being asked to be an adult. So they're not getting what they deserve. That can also, as an aside, lead to an unconscious resentment. And guess what? Mom is your primary female model. So then moving forward, oh, every female in my life is going to want something from me that I may not be able to give.
what what I just love is the simplicity of the delivery of your information that makes you just go, I won't say it on camera, but holy crap, you just go, dude, that makes so much sense. Keep going.
Okay.
Keep bringing the heat, brother.
So that can lead to Patrick Carnes calls it eroticized rage.
Yes.
Pat Carnes loves, really strong words, and I'm guessing because they get the point across, right? They really can't
True.
ignore them, right?
True.
uh, and then I think it was Alex Katahakis used something like uh, gender anger or gender rage, and I like to call it sort of gender hostility. And it's not not necessarily a conscious thing until they're sort of reality checking and they're able to show somebody, sort of hold up a mirror to it. But that's really coming from somewhere in childhood. And I gave you that example of mom. This is not something that any mother or most mothers would say, if you told them that they would go, oh yeah, I wanted to do that.
Right.
Right? It's kind of like saying
100%.
who's got problematic sexual behavior. Oh well, you chose that as a child. Well,
Right.
no, I didn't wake up one day going, hey, I think I'd like to be an addict when I grow up.
Exactly. And that's such a key point, but nevertheless, we become addicts.
Absolutely.
And then
And
we become masterfully avoidant. And then the betrayed partner, which we don't have time to get into, but the betrayed partner does their own cycle of shame and they say, what the hell? Here I am, attractive. I want you, even in spite of all your hideous addiction. I'm pursuing you. And then all you do is avoid me. And
avoid or push me away, or
it's
you know,
a or vilify me as needy, codependent,
yeah,
and oh my gosh. So we're almost
codependent.
done here.
That's well, makes
I
me that makes me almost nauseous. That word.
You're
Um,
dropping nuclear bombs of information here. So we're almost done. Let me
yeah.
ask you this. So for the actor
Mhm.
who is resonating with this, there's no, oh, just do three things. I love whenever somebody starts with, you just need to, that's what makes me nauseous and makes me want to vomit and tell somebody I just want to scratch their face off. But
Right.
what is one significant thing? I have so many clients in my own coaching who are intimacy avoidant and they're wrestling with it. Some of them are far aware, some of them are clueless and just won't do their homework. But what's one significant thing that someone who is intimacy avoidant can do to just move the football down the football field of recovery work? What's one thing they could start with?
Okay, so we did a presentation called with uh, Daring Ventures Summit, and it's called PACE. So presence, authenticity, communication / collaboration, and empathy. So kind of tracking. I think this is very simple. We've come up with something we call the. So Carnes has the personal craziness index. I had changed that to personal challenges because not very many people really attach the craziness part, except for those of us who know we're a bit crazy, right?
This guy. Okay.
So we came up with relational challenges index, which really involves the pace part. And it's really about tracking sort of, okay, well, setting a goal. What's my goal for being present? What's my goal for being authentic? What's so essentially relationally or intimately, what's my goal today with my partner to be intimate. And, most people, if you just introduce the term intimacy, you'll say, okay, how do you define that? 90% of the hands go up, say sex. It's
Right.
not. Sex is absolutely a part of it at some point, right? When people are really connected. But that initial bit where we have so much trouble connecting really needs to be, and for men especially, we tend to like very concrete things, which is why we came up with the Ricky. The CI is called the Picky, so we call the RCI the Picky, the Ricky.
Right.
We work with our clients on that. So every day we, as you know from talking to Sharon, we're big on what we call companioning. So how somebody gets through all those timelines, through this, is in those 5 days, we're companioning them.
Yeah.
We're walking them with them, right? And showing that understanding and really hearing what's going on for each part of it. And that's how they're able to, it's amazing how much detail you can get on timelines. And then we continue that with a daily, twice daily check-in based on the pace, the pace part.
Good.
So they think
that.
And I am going to post a download, and so on our website, which now apparently I have to do really soon. So I think that's really important. Also, self-compassion.
Yeah.
Most people who grow up and end up in intimacy avoidance are absolutely not very connected to themselves.
Yeah.
So you probably know all about attachment and the experiences in close relationships assessment. So we adapted that to self-attachment, which is sort of the concept. And so it's in beta
I love it.
I'm still messing around with the wording. I say we, but honestly, I'm more the sort of tech guy. Sharon puts in on it, and then I'm kind of structuring these things. So it's in beta, but it seems to be working. And what we're finding is that it's working to the extent that it's not always, somebody's self-attachment doesn't always improve in that 5 days, and we figured out why, right? And part of it is because all that reality and now understanding it, they tend to get they can be a bit fearful until they're companioned a little further, right?
Yeah, it makes total sense. Makes total sense. So
sorry, go ahead.
If someone wants to reach out, I wish we could talk for hours because of the nuclear bombs. You got people to coach, I got people to coach. But if someone wants to see if one of your intensives is right for their relationship, what's the next steps? How do they reach out to you to do some type of interview or assessment to see if you're a good fit?
Right. So, and that's how you stated that's really important, because when we do a free consultation. So we do a free consultation. Sharon actually typically does it.
Awesome.
Or Sharon. Right. No, she doesn't. No, she does get my support especially if she feels like, if it's going to be a couple, and
Sure.
So we do the free consultation, and people can get to us through our website, which is hopeforus.com. And there's all kinds of contact buttons on there. Our phone number is 561-345-3510. So that would be the easiest way to do that. We do a ton of assessments. Some of them we've created. A lot of them are also pulled from different areas. So that's how they would get in touch with us, and then we would do the consultation. It's really so that somebody can see, are we going to be a good fit for them, and also are they going to be a good fit for how we do things? Because if not, we want them to get the best help possible for them.
100%.
And so if that means that we're not the place for them, we will help them find somewhere that is. Because it's not about, it's not about competition to us. It's about, care for people who need this.
And that's why I continue to send people your way. Sometimes they come and see you for an intensive, sometimes they don't, but you want to work with people that get it. You want to work with people who are compassionate. You want to work with people who can really meet you in the foxhole, in the trenches of absolute horror. And one therapist calls them healing guides that have come out of the darkness with a flare, going into other people's darkness, saying, hey, I've got a way.
I love that.
So listen, I just can't thank you enough for coming in, sharing some of the information that you did. We got to do this again, and I hope that you'll come back in. So James, thanks so much for being with us today.
Thank you so much, Sam, and would love to come in again, drop a few more bombs, and
It's what we do here. Thank you, James.
Thanks me so much.
Take care, buddy.
All right. Bye, Sam.
Bye-bye.